Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's another Sunday, so it's time to listen to me talk while I'm wearing a tank top, acting like your favorite 40-year-old, 25-year-old. So, yeah, this week I didn't really delve into a new topic. What I wanted to do was provide a 2-week update on a different video that I made. A couple weeks back, I started talking about fat burners and my old experience with them and how I used to just crush a bunch of stimulants. And at the end of the video, I talked about wanting to try a new potential fat burner called alpha yohimbine that I thought had a lot of potential. And the reviews that I read were pretty decent. And so what I want to do in this video is just give you a quick little update on my 2-week progress and giving this a try. And I want to let you know what I think, kind of how it progressed, and where I stand with it now. So, being an avid follower of More Plates, More Dates, I watched his videos about yohimbine and how to him it just felt like a really kind of a dirty compound, and he didn't feel particularly good on it. And so that's when he started to find out about Rauwolscine or alpha yohimbine, whatever you want to call it, the same thing. And he liked it so much that he actually added it to his product line. I didn't buy his product specifically, although I do take his nootropic blend. I like a lot of what he does, but I didn't buy his product specifically for 2 reasons. Number one, he puts rice flour in it as sort of a filler, and I'm not the biggest fan of that because I always train fasted, and I don't want to take rice flour and have it risk breaking my fast. I don't know if it really does or not, but I'm guessing that it does, and so I'd rather steer clear. So I bought a more pure version. It was just pure alpha yohimbine off of Amazon from a company that I know and trust that I've bought from years. Bulk supplements, stimulants division. They call it bulk stimulants. And so I figured it was worth a try, and I started adding it to my morning routine in terms of pre-workout. And I can certainly attest to its efficacy. It definitely is a very effective fat burner. I noticed pretty quickly a difference in my physique, in particular after training fasted. There was about a weight loss of about 2 pounds overall from where I typically sit, and my physique was noticeably more shredded. So in terms of being a fat burner, it's very efficacious. It definitely works, but it doesn't come for free. It actually comes with a pretty significant multitude of side effects that I'm going to talk about. So one of the things that I didn't really like is it feels incredibly dirty. Like, I don't understand why Derek from More Plates, More Dates would say that it's a cleaner compound than yohimbine. If anything, if it is, then yohimbine is dirt nasty, but I felt gross while taking this. I felt like I was lightheaded. I felt super hot. I felt like my basal metabolic rate was risen significantly. I felt a little bit lightheaded. I felt just, for the lack of a better term, sort of overstimulated. But, I was open-minded. I gave it a shot, and it definitely helped. I mean, my workouts were, in the first few days, they were pretty solid. Maybe, a little bit better than normal, which could have been contributed to really anything. But, I figured let's keep it going. But as time went on and as the week went on, I started to notice my recovery not being as good from day to day. I started to notice that I would wake up in the morning more tired. I started to notice little weird aches and pains that I don't normally get. Sort of like weird, like nagging things. And, I don't mean it to sound like I'm injury proof because I'm certainly not, but like weird joint pain, like in my elbow and like the outside of my knee and like my big toe, like strange things that I don't normally get. But we train hard, and it could have been. I just sort of like ran with it for a while, but then I started to realize that my midday naps were just not happening, and that's something that I actually value a lot in my daily routine is my midday naps, and that was kind of the first thing that clued me in. But as a couple days passed, sort of like about a week into it, I realized that it was incredibly overstimulating to the point where it was affecting not only my naps, but it was affecting my nightly sleep. And as the second week started, I noticed that my training sessions, I didn't have the same level of endurance. I didn't have the same level of focus. By the beginning of the second week, so about 9 or 10 days in, my mood started to change. I was a little bit snappier. I wasn't as happy. I was a little bit less focused. And I started to think about it, and I realized that my sleep was just turning into, it was terrible. And so I kept taking it thinking that maybe it would change or anything, but it turns out it was actually a little bit more cumulative than I thought. So, unnecessary anxiety was rising, and sleep was just worse and worse, and I was becoming more snappy and more irritable by day 12. And so that's when I decided, I'm like, all right, you know what? This is an incredibly effective fat burner, but the side effects are a net loss. Without sleep, it doesn't even matter. You're not going to recover. You're not going to feel okay. You're going to go into the next day dragging, and it builds upon itself. And then, you find yourself chasing other stimulus, more coffee, more tea, whatever. It was just kind of a bad thing. In addition, because like I said, I certainly felt a rise in my metabolic rate. I felt warmer overall, which I'm typically not a guy that runs hot. If anything, I sort of run more cold. But I started noticing I was a lot hotter. I was sweating a little bit easier, even just like doing day-to-day things like just working. And I also noticed that I would get I don't want to say hungry per se, because it was more of like an indirect thing. It was mostly like a feeling of a perceived hypoglycemia, where I felt like I just didn't have enough food to run efficiently. My body was like, dude, you got to eat something. And so, being that I work in restaurants, there's always stuff hanging around to eat. And so I'd find something to eat. I'd feel better for maybe 10 minutes. And then that sort of just encompassing fatigue would set in as well. So I find myself even eating more food just to compensate for that. So a pretty interesting experiment. I've done these over the course of years with various things and with varying results. This is one that I didn't particularly enjoy. Now, does this have an application? Perhaps. I think that depending on let's speak about this in purely mixed martial arts athlete or a weight class based sport context. I think that if you're approaching your competition date within a couple of weeks and maybe you're a little bit heavy, I think that with a reduced workload, I think that this compound can actually have a bit of application, because you can lose more weight than you otherwise would. But I don't think that it's healthy to do so with a full training schedule. I think that it actually overall contributes to a detriment, like I said. But in the last few weeks of a camp, if you're starting to taper down your workload and you're looking for a way to sort of burn an extra couple of pounds, I think it's kind of a dirty way to do it, meaning not dirty in terms of cheating, but dirty in terms of it's kind of, I just feel like shit. I don't know, it's just kind of dirty. So I think it certainly has some application in that aspect. I think if you are just kind of a normal person, kind of looking to shed some weight, or maybe to gain some energy for a workout or something, I think it's an awful idea, to be honest with you. I wouldn't recommend it for any of my regular people friends, especially all my friends are in their late 30s or older and stuff, so I would never recommend it for them, because I wouldn't even be surprised if it contributed to heart issues. I mean, it's super overstimulating. And this was on a minimal dose, a tiny, tiny dose. So I can only imagine the stimulant junkies, the guys that drink the energy drinks and, drink coffee and all that stuff. I can only imagine the cumulative effect that it could have on them, especially if you're not in maybe the best health. So I don't view this as a healthy shortcut to losing weight, to using it in that aspect. I think there are better ways to do it. I think, fasted training is a great way. I've talked about acetyl carnitine, but stimulants, in my experience, like I said in the previous video, they have a certain point where the return is very diminishing. And I think that people don't realize that. People think the more stimulant, the better they'll do. I think there's a less is more. I've adopted a less is more mentality. And I certainly think that that's kind of the best way to go with some of these things. The ultra refinement of something like alpha-yohimbine, where it comes from a random tree bark, I think is a dangerous thing, because cocaine comes from a random leaf. And, when you think about cocaine, for example, it comes from a coca leaf that in areas of South America like Peru, where the altitude is very high, they'll actually hand it to you when you get off of an international flight coming into Peru to help you combat altitude sickness, right? But the problem is in its natural state, it's not so big of a deal. I mean, it's trapped within the cellulose and fiber of plants. It's released a little bit slower, and it's sort of something that's a little bit more cooperative in terms of, working with the earth and people. What the problem is you take these leaves and you refine this chemical down to a very, very concentrated white powder, and it creates cocaine. And not that I want to directly compare yohimbine to cocaine. I think that's ridiculous. But my point remains the same: is the more you refine something, the more you isolate a specific chemical that's efficacious in a certain way, the more your body has trouble processing and harnessing it, and the more problems that can come from it. And it's a sort of a broad way of thinking, but in general, it's the way I typically think about a lot of these things. And so, in my opinion, I don't think it's worth it unless, again, you're trying to shed the last couple of pounds because you got too fat during a fight camp and you fucked up and you need to sort of like bail yourself out. Fine. I think it's fine. If you're a bodybuilder and maybe, I don't mean this to sound disrespectful to any of my friends that bodybuild. I understand that it has its own thing, but a lot of other sports carry a much higher workload in terms of training, in terms of endurance, in terms of cardio, in terms of recovery. In bodybuilding, perhaps it has some applications in terms of being able to shed water weight or shed pounds or whatever. I'm not an expert in bodybuilding by any means. I just look like what? That's the most arrogant thing I've ever said. But my point being is that I don't see any other application in my experience and in my sort of vision of it. I don't see any application that I would recommend to really any of my other friends aside from that. So interesting 2-week experiment. Cost all of like $15, but I've spent much more money on that just to make myself laugh. So $15 to be able to give you guys this information and relay it to you, and also to go through the experience myself of trying something. Maybe it would have worked, but in this case, I didn't really much appreciate it. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. If there's anything else you'd like me to talk about in future videos, by all means, let me know. I'm open to anything. And I love your guys' ideas. I appreciate the support, and any of you that watch this, it means a ton to me. And so I'd love to be able to talk about anything that you'd like to learn about. So yeah, we'll talk more next week, but talk to you guys soon.